The first time I heard the rule, I thought she was joking. I was standing in the doorway with a cat carrier in my hand. The little gray tabby inside it, Milo, was shifting around, making that soft complaining sound cats make when they know they and Oppos. About to meet new people. My granddaughter loved cats. At least, she used to. The morning air smelled like fresh coffee and laundry detergent drifting from the house. It was a quiet suburban street outside Denver. Same neighborhood my son bought his house in 6 years ago. Same porch where I had once helped him assemble a plastic tricycle at midnight on Christmas Eve. Funny how a place can look the same and still feel completely different. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, opened the door. She didn't smile. Not even the polite kind. Her eyes dropped immediately to the carrier. "You brought an animal?" she said. Not angry, just irritated. The way someone reacts when the wrong item shows up on a grocery delivery. I gave a small shrug. "It's just a kitten," I said. "Emily told me last time she wanted one." From inside the carrier, Milo let out a tiny MRRP. Jessica sighed like the cat had personally insulted her. She stepped aside just enough for me to enter the hallway. The house was spotless. Everything white. White walls, white furniture, white rug. The kind of house where you feel guilty breathing too loudly. Emily's toys were stacked neatly in plastic bins. No drawings on the fridge. No scattered crayons. No noise. "Emily's upstairs," Jessica said. "But before you go up, we need to talk." That sentence. If you're a parent, you know that sentence. It never leads anywhere good. I set the carrier down gently on the kitchen floor. The clock above the stove read 10:02 a.m. Saturday. The only day I was allowed to visit. Jessica pulled a folded piece of paper from the counter. Printed sheet. Not handwritten. Printed. She handed it to me like a restaurant menu. "These are the new visitation rules." I blinked. "Rules?" "Yes," she said calmly, like this was the most normal conversation in the world. I looked down at the paper. It had bullet points. Actual bullet points. I still remember them. Visitation guidelines. Visits allowed Saturdays only. Maximum 2 hours. Non scheduled visits. No gifts without parental approval. No animals. No food brought from outside. I read it twice, then a third time. For a moment I thought maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding. "You're serious?" I asked. Jessica leaned against the counter. Her arms crossed. "Emily needs structure." I let out a small breath. I had raised 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. None of them required a printed contract to see their grandparents. 2 hours? I asked quietly. "Yes. That includes holidays?" "Yes." "And birthdays?" "Yes." Her tone never changed. Calm. Professional. Like a customer service representative explaining a return policy. From upstairs, I suddenly heard footsteps. Then a small voice. "Grandpa." Emily. My granddaughter. 7 years old. The sound of her voice did something inside my chest that I can't quite describe. Jessica turned her head toward the stairs. "Emily, stay upstairs for a moment," she called. The footsteps stopped. Silence. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Something colder. But Jessica wasn't finished. She tapped the paper with one finger. "And one more thing." I looked up. Her eyes were completely steady. "If you want regular access to Emily, there will be a monthly contribution." Contribution? Yes. She said the number like she was announcing the price of a gym membership. $2,000. For a second I thought I had misheard. 2,000 what? Dollars. Per month. She didn't blink. It helps with Emily's extracurriculars. School tuition. Activities. I actually laughed. A small, confused laugh. "You're charging me to see my granddaughter?" "It's not charging," she said smoothly. "It's supporting the household." That was when I looked toward the staircase again. Emily was sitting on the 3rd step, watching, her small hands wrapped around the railing. She had heard everything. Kids always hear everything. Jessica followed my gaze. She sighed again. "Emily, go back upstairs." Emily didn't move. Instead, she asked the question children ask when adults say strange things. "Grandpa, are you leaving?" Something tightened in my throat. I bent down and opened the cat carrier. Milo stepped out slowly, stretching his tiny legs. Emily's face lit up instantly. "A kitty!" Jessica's voice snapped across the room. "Absolutely not." She picked up the kitten like it was a piece of dirty laundry, then placed him back inside the carrier. Door closed. Click. "No animals," she said, pointing at the paper again. I looked down at the rules, then back at her, then at my granddaughter. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't do any of the things people expect in moments like that. Instead, I folded the paper carefully, put it in my jacket pocket, picked up the cat carrier, walked to the door. Emily's voice followed me. "Grandpa." I paused. She looked confused. Kids can feel when something unfair is happening, even if they don't understand the details. "Will you come back?" I smiled, the kind of smile people use when they're hiding something. "Of course," I said softly. Then I glanced once more at Jessica. "Don't worry about the 2000. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "Oh," I nodded. "I'll take care of it." And I left. The cold air outside hit my face like a wake-up call. I sat in my car for a long time without starting the engine. The cat meowed quietly beside me. "Milo," I said, scratching his head through the carrier door. "You just witnessed something interesting." A week later, I called an old friend. 2 weeks later, I hired a lawyer. 3 weeks later, I started collecting documents. And 4 weeks later, I prepared an envelope. Inside it were 6 pages. Not money, not a check, something far more expensive. The following Saturday, I drove back to my son's house. Same street, same porch, same door. But this time, I wasn't there to negotiate. I was there to deliver something. And when my son opened that envelope, his face went pale. People think revenge begins with anger. It doesn't. It begins with quiet. The kind of quiet that sits in your chest while you replay a conversation again and again. That first Saturday after the rules, I didn't go back. Not the next one either. Jessica never called. My son didn't call. The house phone stayed silent like an unplugged radio. For the first few days, I walked around my kitchen in a fog. I'd pour coffee, forget to drink it, and find the mug cold 2 hours later. Sometimes I would open the refrigerator just to stand there staring at the light. Old habits. My wife used to say I process things slowly. "Your brain is like a diesel engine," she'd laugh. "Takes a while to start, but once it does, good luck stopping it." She'd been gone 8 years now. But that week I heard her voice a lot. Mostly when I started remembering things. Little things. Details that didn't make sense at the time. Like the moment 3 years earlier when Jessica suddenly asked about my retirement. We had been at Thanksgiving dinner. Turkey. Mashed potatoes. My son's attempt at cranberry sauce that tasted like cough syrup. Jessica leaned across the table. "So, how big is your retirement fund?" Just like that. No lead-in. No hesitation. I remember laughing awkwardly. "Big enough to keep the lights on." She didn't laugh. Then there was the time she asked about the lake cabin. "Have you thought about selling it?" The cabin had been in our family for 42 years. My wife and I bought it for $67,000 in 1981. Last year, a realtor told me it was worth nearly $940,000. Jessica's eyes had widened when she heard that number. Back then, I brushed it off. People get curious about money. But now those moments lined up differently in my memory, like puzzle pieces that finally decided to cooperate. On the 3rd week, I called someone. His name is Mark Delaney.
We met in 1978.
Back when we were 2 broke college kids living in a dorm that smelled like pizza and cheap laundry soap. Mark became a lawyer. A very good one. Corporate litigation. The kind of lawyer who wears suits that cost more than my first car. When he answered the phone, he sounded exactly the same as he did 40 years ago. "Tell me someone died," he said. "That's the only reason you call before noon." "Not yet," I said. "But give it time." We met at a diner near his office. The place had those cracked red booths and a waitress who called everyone Han. Mark ordered black coffee and pancakes. Who are we ruining today? I slid the folded sheet of visitation rules across the table. He read it once, then again. Then he leaned back slowly. You're kidding. I wish. He tapped the paper with one finger. And the $2,000? Monthly. Mark let out a low whistle. That's ambitious. I shrugged. She calls it a contribution. Mark rubbed his chin. You have proof she asked for money? Just my memory. He nodded slowly. Memory helps. Evidence wins. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. Who owns your son's house? My son and Jessica. Mortgage. Still paying. How much? Last I heard. Around $410,000 left. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. And Emily's school? Private. Tuition. About $18,000 a year. Mark scribbled something on a napkin. Then he asked the question that made everything click. Who pays for all that? I opened my mouth, closed it again, because suddenly the answer felt uncomfortable. For the past 6 years, I had helped. A lot. The house down payment, $120,000. Emily's preschool tuition, $14,500. Emergency roof repair 2 winters ago, $8,300. And every Christmas I sent them a check, usually around $10,000. I never kept count. Parents don't keep score with their kids, but lawyers do. Mark flipped the napkin toward me. A column of numbers filled the page. Rough estimate, he said. You've given them about $312,000 over the last decade. I stared at the napkin. For a moment the diner sounds faded away. Dishes clinking, coffee pouring, a baby crying in the next booth. $312,000. And now I needed permission and a fee to see my granddaughter. Mark leaned forward. Here's the important question. Okay, are you still financially supporting them? I nodded slowly. I cover Emily's education fund. How much? $2,000 a month. Mark blinked. Then he laughed. Not a cheerful laugh. More like the sound a mechanic makes when he opens a car hood and discovers the engine missing. So let me get this straight, he said. You're already giving them $2,000 a month. Yes. And she wants another $2,000. Just for visitation? I rubbed my temple. When you say it like that. Mark slid the napkin aside. Friend, he said gently. You're not dealing with family conflict. You're dealing with leverage. That word stayed with me all night. Leverage. Money. Control. Access. The next week Mark introduced me to someone else. Her name was Angela Ruiz. Family law specialist. 30 years in courtrooms. 5 minutes into our meeting she said something blunt enough to make me blink. Your daughter-in-law is testing boundaries. Boundaries? Yes. Angela folded her hands on the table. When people believe someone will keep giving money no matter what, they start raising the price. I thought about Jessica's calm voice. $2,000. Like she was ordering takeout. Angela looked directly at me. What matters now is documentation. What kind? Everything. Financial transfers. Education payments. Property contributions. Dates. Receipts. Bank records. For the next 3 weeks, my dining table turned into a paperwork battlefield. Old check stubs. Guair confirmations. Property records. Loan transfers. Receipts going back nearly a decade. One night, I even found the original bank transfer for their down payment. $120,000. Date: June 14, 2019. Memo line: for your new home. Love, Dad. I stared at that memo for a long time. Funny thing about generosity. You never imagine it might become evidence someday. Meanwhile, Mark dug into something else. Property ownership. Trusts. Estate planning. Because there was one detail Jessica didn't know. Not yet. 5 years earlier I had moved most of my assets into a family trust. Cabin. Investments. Savings. Everything. Total estimated value? About $3.8 million. My son was listed as a beneficiary. Jessica wasn't. When Mark read the trust documents, he raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said, "this changes the game." Angela nodded. "If your daughter-in-law believes access to your granddaughter gives her financial leverage." She paused. "Then it may be time she learns who actually holds the leverage." That was the moment the plan began forming. Not revenge. Not exactly. More like correction. A few days later, Mark handed me a folder. Inside were 6 pages. Legal language. Financial summaries. One notarized notice. He tapped the folder. "You don't threaten," he said. "You inform." Angela added one final sentence. "People behave very differently when they discover their assumptions were wrong." The following Saturday morning, I put those 6 pages into a white envelope. Addressed it to my son. Not Jessica, just him. Then I placed it on the passenger seat of my car. Milo the cat watched me from the living room window. "You remember that house?" I asked him. He blinked slowly. Cats always look like they understand more than they should. The drive took 22 minutes. Same quiet street. Same white porch. Same perfectly trimmed hedges. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached. The door opened. My son stood there. He looked surprised. "Dad." I held up the envelope. "I brought something for you." He took it. Curious. Confused. Behind him, Jessica appeared in the hallway. Her arms folded immediately. My son opened the envelope. Pulled out the papers. Started reading. The color drained from his face. By page 3, his hands were shaking. There's a very specific kind of silence that happens when someone reads something they never expected to see. That silence filled the hallway. My son, Daniel, stood there holding the 6 pages like they might suddenly catch fire. Jessica leaned closer behind him. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer. He flipped to the 2nd page. Then the 3rd. His eyes moved faster each time. I watched his face carefully. First confusion. Then recognition. Then something heavier. Jessica finally snatched one corner of the document. "Daniel, what is that?" He swallowed. "Dad, what is this?" I kept my voice calm. "Information." Jessica pulled the paper from his hands. She scanned the 1st page. Her eyebrows tightened immediately. "Termination of financial contributions?" Her eyes jumped down the page. Then back up again. Then she looked at me. "You're cutting off support?" I nodded. "Yes." She flipped to the next page. "This says, effective immediately." "Yes." Her voice sharpened. "You can't just stop paying Emily's education fund." I tilted my head slightly. "Actually, I can." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Dad, hold on." He flipped to page 3 again. The page with the numbers. Every financial transfer over the last 10 years. The down payment. The school tuition. The roof repair. The Christmas checks. Total amount listed clearly at the bottom. $312,400. Daniel stared at the number. Jessica stared at it too. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Then she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "You're seriously bringing this up now?" "I'm not bringing it up," I said quietly. "I'm documenting it." She flipped to the next page. Page 4. That's where things changed. Because page 4 wasn't about money. It was about the trust. Jessica read the heading aloud. Family Asset Trust. Revised Beneficiary Structure. She frowned. "What does that mean?" Daniel's eyes widened slightly. He turned the page back toward himself. Then he read the line out loud. And his voice got very quiet. Primary beneficiary, Emily Carter. Jessica blinked. "What?" Daniel kept reading. Secondary beneficiary, charitable distribution. Her voice rose. "Wait. Where am I?" Daniel flipped through the page again. Then looked up at me slowly. "You removed me." I nodded once. "Yes." The hallway felt colder. Jessica grabbed the paper again. "That's ridiculous." She scanned the page quickly. "Wait. This says your estate is valued at." Her voice stopped. She looked up. $3.8 million? I didn't correct her. Because that was the conservative estimate. She flipped the page again. That can't be right. Daniel's face had gone pale. Dad. He looked at me carefully. You asked for $2,000 a month. Jessica stiffened. That was a contribution. Yes. I nodded calmly. And I already contribute $2,000 a month. Daniel turned to her quickly. You told him that? Jessica hesitated. Well, you told my dad he had to pay to see Emily? She crossed her arms. You're twisting this. No, Daniel said quietly. I'm reading it. Then he looked back at me. Dad? You're really stopping everything? I nodded. Yes. Emily's school too? Yes. Jessica snapped. You can't just abandon her like that. The word abandon hung in the air. I let out a slow breath. Jessica, I've given your household over $300,000. I tapped the paper. That's not abandonment. That's generosity. Daniel leaned against the wall. He looked like someone who had just realized the floor beneath him might not be solid. Jessica, however, was still fighting. This is manipulation, she said sharply. You're trying to control us with money. I tilted my head. Interesting. She pointed at the documents. You're using legal threats. I'm using legal clarity. Her voice rose again. So now what? You're suing us? I shook my head. No. That surprised her. Then what is this? I reached out and tapped the final page. Page 6. The notarized notice. Jessica read it slowly. Her lips moved silently over the words. Then she said them out loud. Formal request for structured visitation. Daniel blinked. What? She continued reading. Every Saturday. For hours minimum. Unrestricted interaction between grandfather and granddaughter. Her eyes jumped to the final line. And if denied, her voice faltered. Legal petition for grandparent visitation rights. The hallway went silent again. Daniel looked stunned. You're taking us to court? I shrugged lightly. Only if necessary. Jessica's voice turned cold. You wouldn't win. Angela had warned me about this moment. People often say things with confidence when they don't actually know the law. So I simply said one sentence. Colorado courts consider financial support and established family relationships. Daniel slowly sat down on the staircase, right where Emily had sat weeks earlier. He stared at the papers again. Dad. His voice was softer now. You already filed this? I nodded. Prepared it. Jessica whispered. You planned all this? I gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't show teeth. Jessica. I paused, then added quietly. You wrote the rules first. From upstairs, a small voice suddenly echoed down the hallway. Grandpa. All three of us looked up. Emily was standing at the top of the stairs, her hair messy, still in pajamas. She saw me and smiled, the same bright smile she always had. Did you bring the kitty? Jessica opened her mouth to answer, but Daniel raised a hand. Wait. He looked at the papers again, then at me, then at Jessica. For the first time that morning, he looked unsure whose side he was standing on. Children have a strange talent. They can walk into a room full of adult tension and cut straight through it like sunlight through dusty windows. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, holding the railing with both hands. Her hair was sticking out in every direction. She had one sock on and one bare foot. Grandpa, she said again, did you bring the kitty? For a moment, nobody answered. Jessica looked like she wanted to say something sharp. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. I looked up at my granddaughter and smiled. Yes, I said gently. I brought Milo. Emily's face lit up instantly. She started down the stairs 2 steps at a time. Jessica stepped forward quickly. Emily, wait. But Daniel raised his hand again. Let her. That surprised Jessica. Surprised me too. Emily reached the bottom step and ran straight to me. She wrapped her arms around my waist. Kids don't hesitate the way adults do. They don't calculate. They don't negotiate love. They just give it. I reached down and hugged her back. You got taller, I said. She pulled away and grinned. You say that every time. That's because it keeps being true. Behind her, Daniel was still holding the papers. Jessica was watching him carefully now. She knew something had shifted. Daniel looked at the documents again. Then he looked at her. "You didn't tell me about the money." Jessica stiffened. "I didn't think it mattered." "It matters. You're overreacting." Daniel shook his head slowly.
No.
Then he looked at me. "How long have you been paying for Emily's school?" "4 years." His eyes widened slightly. "You never told me." I gave a small shrug. "You were busy." Jessica cut in quickly. "Daniel, we're not doing this right now." "Yes," he said quietly. "We are." He looked down at page 3 again. The long list of transfers. The down payment. The tuition. The repairs. The Christmas checks. Jessica crossed her arms. "You're acting like we forced him." "No," Daniel said. "We didn't." He paused. "But we didn't exactly stop him either." The silence that followed was heavier than before. Jessica turned toward me. "So what now?" I answered honestly. "Now, things change." Emily tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa." "Yes." "Where's the kitty?" I chuckled softly. "In the car." Her eyes grew huge. "Can I see him?" I looked at Daniel. Not Jessica. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. "Okay." Emily squealed and ran toward the door. Jessica stared at him. "You're just letting him walk in here after this?" Daniel didn't answer. He simply stepped aside so I could open the door. The cool air outside felt different this time. Lighter. Emily bounced beside me on the porch. "Is he orange?" "Nope." "Black?" "Nope." "Is he a tiger?" "Close enough." When I opened the car door, Milo let out a dramatic little meow. Emily gasped like she had just discovered treasure. "He's tiny. Cats start that way," I said. She carefully reached into the carrier and lifted him out. Milo stretched lazily in her hands. Jessica watched from the doorway. She looked like she wanted to object. But she didn't. Sometimes silence is the first sign someone realizes they've lost control of a situation. Inside the house, Emily sat on the living room rug with the kitten. Milo immediately attacked a shoelace like it was the greatest enemy in the world. Emily giggled so loudly the room seemed to brighten. For a few minutes, nobody talked about lawyers, or trusts, or money. Daniel stood by the window watching his daughter play. After a while, he spoke quietly. "Dad." "Yeah. Are you really ready to take us to court?" I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I'm ready to protect my relationship with my granddaughter." He nodded slowly. Jessica looked at him sharply. "You're not seriously considering letting him push us around like this?" Daniel turned to her.
No.
Then he gestured toward Emily on the floor. "But I'm also not going to turn my dad into a visitor who needs permission slips." Jessica's jaw tightened. "You're choosing him over your wife?" Daniel sighed. "I'm choosing common sense." She looked like she wanted to argue again. But something in his voice stopped her. He looked tired. Not angry, just tired. "Jess," he said quietly, "you asked my father for money to see his granddaughter. It was a contribution." He shook his head. "It was a mistake." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened, closed, opened again. When she came back, her voice was cooler. "Fine." Daniel looked at her. "Fine what?" She crossed her arms again. "He can visit." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "How long?" Jessica exhaled slowly. 4 hours. I smiled slightly. "Progress." She shot me a look. "Don't push it." Emily suddenly looked up from the floor. "Can Grandpa come next Saturday too?" Daniel answered before anyone else could. "Yes." Jessica didn't argue. That was the real turning point. Not the documents. Not the trust. Not the legal threat. Just a small moment where someone finally realized they had pushed too far. About 20 minutes later, I stood at the door again. Emily hugged me tightly. "Milo can stay here, right?" Jessica opened her mouth. Daniel spoke first. "We'll see." Emily grinned. "That means yes." Kids understand negotiations better than adults sometimes. As I stepped outside, Daniel followed me onto the porch. He held the envelope in his hand. Dad. Yes. I didn't know about the trust. I know. He stared at the papers. 3.8 million. That's just paperwork. Because I needed to see who you were when money wasn't involved. Daniel stood there quietly for a long moment. Then he nodded. I guess. I just found out too. The strange thing about conflict is this. The loudest moment isn't always the most important one. Sometimes the real change happens quietly, weeks later, when people have time to sit with what they've done. 3 Saturdays after the envelope, I pulled into the same driveway again. But this time, the door opened before I even reached the porch. Emily came running outside. Grandpa! She was holding Milo like a football. The kitten had grown slightly bigger, but his attitude was still the same. As soon as he saw me, he wiggled free and sprinted across the yard like he had discovered a brand new universe made entirely of grass. Emily chased him. I laughed. From the doorway, Daniel watched them. He looked different than he had a month earlier. Less tense. Maybe a little older too. That's the effect of difficult realizations. They add invisible years to your face. Hey, he said. Hey. We stood there for a moment in that familiar father-son silence. Then he rubbed the back of his neck. I talked to Jessica. I nodded. I figured. She knows she crossed a line. That's good. He hesitated. She also knows the money's not coming back. That's also good. Daniel gave a small, tired laugh. You always did have a way of making a point. I shrugged. I prefer clarity. Inside the house, things had changed too. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The printed visitation rules were gone from the counter. Emily's drawings were taped to the refrigerator again. There was a half-finished Lego castle on the coffee table. Messy, normal, alive. Jessica came down the hallway a few minutes later. She looked at me for a moment, then said something I hadn't expected. Hello. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. Progress often looks like neutrality. Hello, Jessica. She leaned against the doorway. Emily's laughter floated in from the yard. After a few seconds, she spoke again. I didn't think you would push back. That's understandable. Most people wouldn't. That's probably true. She folded her arms, but this time it looked more like habit than defense. I thought you would just keep helping. I nodded. I probably would have. She frowned slightly. Then why didn't you? I answered honestly. Because you turned generosity into a transaction. Jessica didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched Emily through the window. Then she sighed quietly. That wasn't my intention. Maybe not. But that's what happened. The room stayed quiet for a while. Then Daniel walked back in holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. You know, he said. Mark called me. I raised an eyebrow. My lawyer. Yeah. Daniel smiled faintly. He said if we ever try anything like that again, he'll personally enjoy destroying us in court. I chuckled. That sounds like Mark. Daniel shook his head. You really went all in. I took a sip of coffee. I spent 30 years building my life. He nodded slowly. I guess I forgot that. That was probably the most honest thing he had said since this whole situation started. And honesty, even delayed honesty, has value. About an hour later, Emily ran inside again. Milo climbed the tree. Daniel groaned. That cat is going to get stuck up there. Emily grabbed my hand. Grandpa, come see. I followed her outside. Milo was halfway up a small maple tree, staring proudly at the world like he had conquered Everest. Emily pointed up at him. He thinks he's a lion. I laughed. Every cat thinks that. She tilted her head. Grandpa. Yes. Why didn't you visit for a while? Children ask questions adults avoid. I crouched down beside her. Sometimes grown-ups need time to fix mistakes. She nodded thoughtfully. Then she asked the question that mattered more. But you're back now, right? I smiled. Yes. She hugged me again, tightly. Later that afternoon, as I was leaving, Daniel walked me to the driveway. The sun was low in the sky, the kind of golden light that makes ordinary streets look nostalgic. He leaned against my car. So, what happens to the trust? I looked at him. That depends. On what? On the future. He nodded slowly. That's fair. Then he added quietly, for what it's worth.
I'm sorry.
I believed him, not because he said it, but because he didn't say anything else afterward.
No excuses. No explanations.
Just silence. And sometimes silence is the closest thing to truth people can manage. I opened the car door, then paused. One more thing. Daniel looked up. Yes. Don't let money decide how your daughter sees family. He nodded. I won't. I got into the car and started the engine. As I pulled away, Emily waved from the porch. Milo sat beside her like a tiny gray statue, watching, judging. Cats are excellent judges of character. On the drive home, I thought about something Mark had said weeks earlier. Revenge, he told me, is overrated. Control is temporary. Victory fades. But dignity? Dignity lasts. The truth is, I didn't really win anything. I didn't take money. I didn't destroy anyone. All I did was draw a line. And sometimes, drawing the line is the most powerful move a person can make. The best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's showing them exactly where they lost you.